Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode, and I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to want to watch this video all the way through because I'm going to be doing a very substantial giveaway that you're going to want to get in on, and how to win rather easily will be revealed in this video at some point. And yes, it's to make you watch the whole video, but you still make out in the deal, so you can't complain. You can if you want, but nobody's going to listen. At any rate, here we go. So Hudson, do you like coming to the shop?
Yep.
Do you like Land Cruisers?
Yep.
Do you love Land Cruisers?
Yes.
Does your dad build the best Land Cruisers?
Yes.
I think so too. Which one's your favorite truck?
The 40.
It's the 40? Did you just say the 40?
Yeah.
The blue one?
Yeah.
Oh my. What about the 80 though?
That's my second.
Remember that time we were way up on that mountain and it was bad?
Yeah.
I was scared and you and your brother weren't. Yeah.
They're like, we didn't play in the snow.
Right? In the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity to meet every owner of every legitimate Toyota shop in America. And I've also met every owner of every awesome Toyota in America. In the last 10 years, there's been a trend of people importing from South America and Dubai, importing their dream rigs. And before you do that, you're going to want to listen to what the experts have to say. In order to do that, you're going to want to sit back, you're going to want to relax, and you're most definitely going to want to check this out. And before we start this video, I'm going to ask you to hit that little subscribe button as well as the little bell next to it so you're notified of all new videos. Here we go. I've spent a lot of time behind the wheel of a Toyota in the last 10 years, and I've spent a lot of time in shops all over the United States. I make it my business to find shops that are just starting out and help them, because that's what videos do. No two ways about it. It's all good. I had the opportunity to see vehicles that were going to become famous before they were famous, and that is absolutely awesome. But to find a shop that absolutely loves Toyotas as much as I do is very tough to come by. There's a lot of shops out there. There's a lot of shops that are huge on Instagram and on the internet, but their main thing is to make money, and that's all there is to it. Cool. I've got a chance to meet some of the best fabricators in the United States. I've got a chance to meet some of the best technicians in the United States. And to find them all in one spot is a very, very rare thing. People that know Toyotas from inside, outside, upside down, every which way there is. And Redline Land Cruisers is one of those places. I've known Justin for about 5 years. We've done wheeling together. He's helped me out. I've helped him out. It is what it is, blah, blah, blah. But the other day, I rolled into his shop, and the first thing I saw was these. And by nature, I'm not a 40 series, guys, but you can't deny these things. These things look absolutely magnificent. These trucks were imported from South America by the owners and then brought to Redline to give them the once-over, to make sure everything was good to go, made sure they work. And I'm looking at these things inside, outside, underneath. And as you can see, they look immaculate. I'm looking at these things thinking to myself, these are like brand spanking new. So I got the cameras all over them. I'm climbing all around. I'm loving this. This is amazing. And I mentioned to the shop foreman, a kid named Georgie, who I've met before. He worked on my 80 series years ago. And I'm like, these things are amazing. And he went, yeah, not so much. So right away I'm thinking, this guy's an asshole. But it turns out that when these trucks get dropped off, even though the owner paid $50, $60, $70, $80,000 for them, South America, Dubai, etc., they know how to make these trucks look really good. But here's some of the horror stories that come along with them, because these trucks need about $30, $40 to $50,000 to make them absolutely legit. I didn't believe it. I thought Georgie was the problem, and I was wrong. It turns out these trucks are a Fugazi.
That's a Fugazi? How do you know it's a Fugazi? You looked at it for 2 seconds. Well, it's a fake.
And most of these trucks were indeed Fugazis. So when I'm talking to the shop foreman and I'm looking at this incredibly beautiful truck and he's telling me, yeah, it needs a lot of work, I'm thinking, this guy's a shyster. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But the longer I was at the shop and the more stories that I heard and the more things that I saw for myself after looking at the trucks incredibly closely, I understood that there was a problem. I mean, think about it. Most of these trucks are coming from Colombia. What's the last thing that Colombia put out for us? Think about it.
Es digestiva, te dan ganas de cagar, weón. Es muy sana esta weón.
Exactly. Because the cartels, Land Cruisers specifically, were a huge status symbol. And after all the cartels got taken over by the Central Intelligence Agency, those guys have nothing to do now. So they're just doctoring, prettying up these Land Cruisers and shipping them across the ocean, where you have the ultimate used car salesman that you can never contact again. Once you buy it, you own it. So I decided to make this video to warn you that if you drop down $50,000 to $100,000 on a truck that looks perfect, do not be surprised when it shows up with Bondo on the frame, a rat's nest for wiring, the engine with literal food as opposed to gear oil in it. Yeah, apparently that's a thing. Now, why do I call these guys at Redline Land Cruisers experts? Because they've been doing this a long, long time. They have developed things like big brake kits for the 80 series when nobody else offered them. They literally machined them and made them themselves in-house. These guys do all the restoration, from a resto mod to a full-blown restoration. Whatever you need done, they do it in-house. They don't send it out and claim they do the work. They actually do the work. Now, I've spoken highly of other shops a little prematurely, only to find out that they didn't know what they were doing whatsoever at all. That will be coming in a later video, as well as a television episode. So it is what it is. When somebody pays you and gives you all the time in the world and you still screw them, yeah, you're going to end up on the Discovery Channel. But on that, I'll digress. Why do I call these guys experts? Because they do incredible work, as you'll see and hear for yourself. These boys just have Toyota gear oil running through their DNA, while other shops, they just don't. So we're with the shop foreman. This is Georgie, really good guy. He's helped me out a lot with my 4Runner, and he's responsible for a lot of the crazy stuff that I've shown you in the shop. But Georgie, let me ask you one thing, and you were the first one in the shop when I walked in a couple of weeks back and I saw those 40s and I was like, wow, those are beautiful. And you went, nah. And I didn't understand where you're like, look, these things just got imported. They're all shined up. They're beautiful. And then I started seeing some of the things you guys were pointing out. What's the craziest thing you've seen on a truck that needed, I mean, you can't drive this thing. This is no good. I mean, we've already talked about Bondo on the frame, pulling animal fat out of transfer cases and differentials. What's the craziest shit you've seen?
Some of the crazier stuff I've seen is seat frames made out of wood. So they just use some pine wood to, get the frames of the seats into the car. And one good hit from anything would pretty much just break that thing off. they just do anything to make these things look nice and presentable to sell. And the importers see it on a picture, and then they get it in hand, and things are not what they seem. And it's a whole culmination of just things that were rigged or just, you know, tried to get fixed, like trail fixes over the years, and it's just crazy sometimes if you start looking close what you'll see.
But so they used wood to frame it, but when you look at it, does it look legit?
Yeah, it looks like some seats that they pulled out of a junkyard car, and it looks good.
That's crazy,
looks
dude.
legit, and then you go to pull them out, and you go, oh, what? Oh, hold on. There's literally wood holding this together.
So okay, that's insane. I didn't hear that story yet, so I appreciate that. You said that underneath the truck you found bolts that were ground down to look like rivets. So
yeah, they made them look like factory rivets. They must have like ground off and removed some spring perches that hold the front leaf springs in place, and basically when they were reinstalling them, they would install bolts and just basically round the head of the bolts and the nuts and make it look like a rivet. Nothing was ever welded or anything, and we know because it comes loose and you can see the threads from what would be a bolt going.
right, I get
Thought it
that.
was a loose rivet maybe at first and just being beat on in the jungle or, you know, whatever. And you get looking closer, and it was literally a bolt. Just bolts with the heads rounded, and everything was just tightened down, and then they rounded the heads. And
That's a trip,
spray
man.
painted over stuff. And
So they're just working with whatever they got, and they're just trying to get it on the boat, get it across the ocean, and it's yours.
it's not even the South American vehicles. I mean, we've seen vehicles that were imported, like, you know, Japanese-only versions of 80 series and stuff, and everything looks nice and kosher when you're looking at it, and then you get up underneath the frame, and they've literally just took and spray paint or some kind of paint and just coated over literally everything. So in a picture, everything looks good because it has low miles or whatever, but you get to actually working on some of this stuff, and it's just been beat to death and then just paint thrown over it to make it look good for pictures, and then
Wow.
people import it.
And once they import it, they have zero recourse.
Exactly.
They bring it to you guys give it a once over, and then, hey, by the way, what you just spent for the truck, you're probably gonna need to spend the same amount to make it legit.
Yep, and we've seen it time and time again. It's just rough. Anything that's been imported there that's just not U.S. vehicle is just extra questionable, the quality of the work that's gone into it or the maintenance that's gone into it, because those diesels will say the motor's got, you know, low miles, but the timing belts have to be changed every so often, and the motor looks good on the outside, and then people go and take a peek at the timing belt, and it's just all gunked up behind there. Nothing's ever been changed. So they sell them, they make them sound better than they are sometimes, and people just eat them up because it's the stuff you couldn't get here. And they are cool, but sometimes it's a trap, it seems like.
I got you. They got no it's here.
Yeah, for
It's
real.
the ultimate used car dealership,
Yeah.
but you can't drive down there and
It's
yell
like
at them.
Yeah, it's almost like a honey trap, you know? They get you with something that you really want, and then you get it in hand, and it's not what you thought it was.
So there's Georgie. That's the guy that I thought was an asshole at the beginning of this entire thing, and he inspired me to make this video. Imagine you spend $50 to $100 or maybe even north of $100,000 only to discover that there is animal fat for lubricant and your seat frames are made of wood. You have no way of knowing this until it shows up. At any rate, let's talk to one of the fabricators, one of the CAD guys in the shop. All right, so I'm with Brian again, one of the technicians here at Redline. He's actually, your main thing is fabrication. When they need something that doesn't exist built, that's what you do, correct?
Right, yeah, I do a lot of the welding and fabrication around here, plasma cutting, CAD drawing, stuff like that. So, yeah.
So this is a very old-looking, unattractive, well-patinaed FJ40, but then when you look underneath it, what's going on here? I mean, that looks like the engine out of a Camaro or something.
Yeah, it is. So it's a crate motor, Chevy motor, small block 350, about 350 horse.
Wow.
It's got a 4-barrel double pumper carb on it, Holly. We converted the whole front belt system into serpentine. We do these in-house, these SAG steering and gearbox, power steering gearbox conversions. Usually the gearbox sits way up here in the frame, and we convert it up to here to get that crossover steering, high crossover steering, which is what you see here. So, but yeah, we've had to custom make the motor mounts, scab plates, brackets for the transmission, the cross member, everything's been custom made. The whole axle's been rebuilt. It's got RCB axles, ARB lockers with new gears, new knuckles, big brakes off the, I think that's a 4th gen 4Runner.
I think it's a 5th gen.
Maybe 5th gen.
The only reason I say that is because I believe you told me that when I came in.
Right, it might be a 5th gen, yeah.
So those are the brakes I took off my truck, and you put those on a truck that's how old? 30, 40 years old?
Yeah, this is 50 years old now.
That's crazy, man.
50-year-old truck.
That's crazy. This is a serious setup. You do a lot of these too, right?
Yep. And the crazy thing is this thing's got a big old gas tank in it. We redid all the seats, so it's got a
Oh, shit.
it's got a fuel tank that carries all the way over to the driver's side. So
Wow.
And then I had to custom build all these seat brackets and everything to get the seats to fit in here, and these are Corvo seats.
They're beautiful. That's a huge step up from the
You got
the
so much-
usual FJ40.
Yeah, you got a lot of leg room in there now. So.
And I mean, are those the same differentials or are those completely
So
different
these,
axles?
Yeah, these are the same axles, just with all new outers. So new brake kits. Like this thing had 4-wheel drum brakes originally, no booster or nothing like that. And then we put a booster in here and got 4-wheel disc brakes. And these brakes are actually off of I believe a Monte Carlo.
Wow.
So
FJ, and I mean, look at the customer's main concern isn't the body, the aesthetics.
not at the moment. I imagine it will be in the future. But
I mean, because he's just basically turned this thing into a monster that no one's going to know until they pop the hood.
yeah, this thing will probably light up all 4 tires if you wanted it to.
That's sick, dude. So do you love this stuff, the Toyotas?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I've been a Toyota nut my whole life.
Yeah, you got a pretty serious Tundra out there. That's a big. The hood's way over my head. I mean, I'm not that tall, but I mean, the hood's over your head.
Yep, and that's just my little grocery getter ground pounders.
That's crazy. All right, man. Anything else?
Not that I can think of. I mean, other than the fact that we put a transmission and T-case out of a 60 series.
What does that do? Just bigger, better?
So it gives you a 5-speed transmission instead of probably the original 3 or 4-speed that was in
Oh,
here.
yeah. All right. I should have known that.
Stronger gearing, longer. You can get on the highway with this thing a little bit more comfortably with that V8 especially. And it's got a split case transfer case in it too.
That's crazy.
We also did a gear down on that as well.
So this thing's going to be a monster crawler if he wants, right?
It'll do anything you want. You can go on the highway 80 mile an hour or take it off the road and go rock crawling. So.
That is crazy, man. You got to, I mean, as long as you love it, you got a great job.
Right, yeah.
Because I love this stuff, man. You see, I've been here 2 weeks. I love this
I
place.
live and breathe this kind of stuff. I go home and do the exact same stuff.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Now, Brian had told me a horror story about an FJ55 that was sitting there, but it belongs to a customer, and we didn't have his permission to put the information out there. But I'll tell you what, he paid a boatload of money. He paid as much for a FJ55 as I did for a 2019 TRD Pro, and the welds on it, it was unbelievable. So they're sorting that all out. But again, I didn't have the permission of the customer, so I'm going to delete it. But you got an opportunity to see some of the work that they do. It's a phenomenal work. And you don't drop your car off and it sits there for 2-3 years like other shops. These guys banged out an FJ40 in a week while I was there. From what looked like a pile of crap to loading it on and delivering it to South Dakota. Pretty badass. At any rate, let's talk to another one of their technicians, a guy named Thomas. But before we get to Thomas, let's talk about why most of you are here. The giveaway. There's going to be 4 prizes, 4 winners. One of the prizes is going to be a brand new Mystery Ranch, made in the United States, 3-day assault pack. These things are legit. It's never been used. These are what the troops carry. The second thing I'm going to be giving away is a brand new Starlink. Never used, never registered. You will have to do a monthly subscription if you decide to pick this prize. It comes in the Pelican Case Air, as you can see, and this thing is pretty serious. And the third and fourth prizes is going to be a brand new Half-Breed Blades light infantry knife, the one that I'm holding right there, with the Kydex sheath. These things are sick, they're stout, and they're sharp. And the last prize will be this Half-Breed Blades Tonto. If you want to enter the contest, you're going to have to continue watching this video as I'll explain the very easy rules later in the video. Here we go. What's the worst thing you saw on it that you never seen?
I would have to say the worst thing I saw was the way they did the brake line flares. Not in line with anything I've been taught since I was a little kid in high school. You know, they were flared, I think, once, like a trumpet. They were wrapped in Teflon tape, and they were just slammed into the fittings and tightened as hard as they could.
Was that the refrigeration line?
No, that's a brake line.
No, I know, but they told me that one of the trucks came in and the brake lines weren't even made out of brake lines. They were made out of refrigeration lines or something to that effect?
Yeah, they try and think they can get away with just running copper, like what you would run for an AC line or gas line or something like that. And what they don't understand is that the repetitive flex and vibration along with the pressure of a brake line is very abusive.
Right.
So the flares that we make in brake lines are almost unique to brake lines because of how much pressure and how much abuse they see. They need to be strong and they need to hold up to a pretty nasty environment.
Right, it makes sense.
So, you know,
it's under the truck and brake line eats.
The big thing is we have safety concerns that go from, you know, doing oil changes at your local stop and lube place all the way up to, you know, building world-class race trucks or race cars or anything like that. And one of those is brake lines. We do not screw around with anything that is mechanically failed or anything that is leaking. That is 100% no-no.
Right.
So when it comes to servicing and rebuilding and refurbishing those systems, you have to do it to at least an OE quality level. And if you don't, you're basically taking the person's life that drives that vehicle, putting it in your hand and dropping it. And if it hits the ground and breaks, okay, fine. But if it does, that's not something you want on your shoulders. So that was the scariest thing that when I pulled it apart, I went, we need to do every brake line on this.
And I mean, how many years have you been doing this? 20?
Automotive repair for a paycheck, about 13. But I mean,
and you never saw anything like that? No. Domestic?
I learned how to do drum brakes with my dad on his 60s Impala when I was like 7 or 8 years old. So working
You've been at this for a bit.
A very long time.
I got
it's
you.
Not, you know, I don't go home at the end of the day and play on computers or, you know, play with some other hobby. I've got my own project vehicles. I've got my own Toyotas. You know, this is not just a hobby or a day job. This is a way of life.
Right.
You know, the term passion comes up a lot. Well, that's one way to do it, but when you're always constantly thinking about that weird brake noise that passes you going down the road, or why does that engine over there sound like a lawnmower? When you're just on your way to, you know, dinner with the wife, it changes you. You're a different person after you do this stuff for a certain amount of time.
So they're not only slipping one by the guy that's buying it, but anybody that's going to be in front of that truck when it decides not to stop is in danger.
Correct.
All right, thanks, brother.
Yep.
So, while on the topic of Thomas had the distinction of bringing one of the shop's more famous vehicles back to life. And the truck was called the Dog's Bollocks. It's an FJ40 with a 5-cylinder Mercedes turbo diesel in it. Now, this truck has graced the covers of many magazines, one of them with Justin and his wife actually driving it, which was very, very cool. So, while I was there, Thomas managed to put in a new motor, a new turbo, and get the entire thing up and running, because this is the ultimate Frankenstein, but when it's running right, it is no joke whatsoever at all. We took it out, of course, in the middle of a thunderstorm, which was awesome. If you've never heard of the Dog's Bollocks, Google it, because this truck was very, very famous, and thanks to Thomas's handiwork being tapped by Justin to bring this thing back to life, I was able to take a test drive with him. So for those that don't know exactly what they're looking at, this is a 5-cylinder Mercedes turbo diesel in a Toyota FJ40 frame that's been turned into a monster rock crawler with Redline's own proprietary secret sauce front and rear axles. Being able to revive this thing, because there's no manual, these guys are rock stars in this particular arena. But let's get back to the horror stories, shall we? Here's Rodney. What's the worst story you've got that you saw yourself on a truck coming from Colombia? Like the craziest thing you couldn't believe, and something that's, I mean, somebody paid real good money to import this thing.
Well, I mean, two of them, and the one we were talking about with the beef fat coming out of the axles, trying to impersonate grease, but it wasn't grease, it was
But it's
beef
just,
fat.
just to, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
it's beef, like hamburger,
Yeah. Beef, like
food.
grade product, like not engineered grade product, but it's what's available for those guys down there to just make it not chatter when they getting it on the boat and getting it on the, the ship ride over here. So yeah.
To the layman, that is the ultimate sawdust in the transmission used car guy trick.
Yeah.
But we don't do that here.
No, absolutely not. We use super grade A product here, but the one that really kind of like takes the cat's meow is the time we had the 45 with the refrigerator line being used for brake lines, and it wasn't flared properly. It was leaking, but it was literally like they painted they painted the lines over to make it look like the right material.
Wow.
And it was just refrigerator line, not DOT.
So I just talked to one of your technicians, Thomas, out in the shop, and he was telling me about a similar case. It wasn't refrigerant lines, it was just really, really bad brake lines. But brake lines eat. Like it needs to be a specific type of metal flare because brake lines, brake fluid is incredibly corrosive, correct?
Think about it, they talk about like, if you get that on your paint or whatever, you got to get that off like immediately.
I've learned that the hard way, so holy cow.
And so it's like same thing for the metal. If it stays on the wrong type of metal for too long, it's going to eat through that. And that may have been why it was already, we know it wasn't because of the metal, it was because of the flaring job that they tried to do with like a Phillips head screwdriver.
Wow.
It wasn't the right stuff. So that one, the ones drop that for us, it's like when you start putting people's safety, at risk, that's the tough part. But
that's what I was saying with Thomas. It's not only the fact that chances are if you're importing a Toyota or an older Land Cruiser, this is your dream vehicle. You've saved up. It's a big expense. The truck shows up, you can't send it back. There's no warranty. There's no calling the guy. And things like the brake lines, not only are you jammed up now, but you're putting other people in danger. For real. You're driving a 2-ton vehicle that the brake lines were done by a guy in a jungle with a rock and a screwdriver.
Right.
Not trying to be a dick,
but that's, it's exactly the situation. But, and we it sucks for us because now we got to tell the customer, hey, look, like we weren't in here to do this job, but we cannot let this vehicle leave this shop unsafe.
Liability. It's huge.
Yeah, because once it leaves the shop here, now it's got our name attached to it.
Right.
Forever.
That's what inspired me to run this video anyways, because like I said, the day I walked in here a couple weeks back, there was a couple of beautiful 40s, and I was like, wow, those are amazing. They said, yep, they're just off the boat. And they said, this guy paid 50, this guy paid 60, and then it still needs 30 grand.
Yeah.
You can't, it's so shined up. It's beautiful, but Bondo on the frames, refrigerator line brakes, food as a lubricant in your differential. I'd never even heard of that, and I've been around a bit, you know?
Yeah.
That is a trip, man.
But the psychology of it, when I first came here and I came in when we had a whole rash of these vehicles in, and it really bothered me because, I'm like, these poor customers are just getting bent. And I really had to get into, understand, what was happening. And you're, it's a third world country. A Land Cruiser down there is basically the F-150. It's the work truck of the country.
Right, and the cartels, that was a sign of success.
Yeah.
So, they back in the 80s, they flooded the place with Land Cruisers, and now the cartels, for all we know, are gone, so they're everywhere now.
But for a farmer or a worker or whatever, if this is his livelihood and this is his work rig, he's not selling his work rig.
Right.
But so if this rig is being sold, then this must have been the rig that was put out to pasture because they can't get the parts to do all the mechanical.
This truck ain't going to make us no money. Send it to America.
Right.
Shine it up.
Shine it up, put some paint on it, send it. And I get it. It's like this pays for a family down there for a year or two of living.
Right.
But to me, it's like there's someone in the middle That someone in the middle is the one that's like milking the cow.
And that's the guy you ain't never gonna get a hold of.
Nah.
There's no. It's not like bringing a used car salesmen get a bad rap because a lot of used car salesmen deserve a bad rap.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate used car salesman. You got the ocean between them.
Yeah.
You ain't driving down there to complain.
And the problem is too is like it's a dishonest service to the Land Cruiser community. It's bad for us in general. You know, we're hurting the reputation of the Land Cruiser. We're hurting the enthusiasts that are just coming in. They want to be enthusiasts, but they're getting burnt out right
Right.
out of the gate. They have just a bad taste in their mouth. So that's where it's like you really need to scrutinize these rigs. And we tell people like, look, man, don't buy the rig until you bring it here and let us go through it, and then we can talk about buying it.
But that's a tough one.
But how are you going to do that from South America?
Right, and it's not even that. Like, I just recently interviewed a buddy of mine who owns a shop in the Ozarks, and he got a Troopy. It wasn't bad. It did have a couple of issues, but it looked like a new car.
Yeah.
They did a really good job. But then you got to remember, the boys in Dubai, those dudes, a Land Cruiser is a crash test dummy bumper car all rolled in one. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I'm Rodney. I appreciate your time on this, man. I know you're piled up here with phone calls and every other thing, but I just thought this would be a good video to put out there. Before you buy a Land Cruiser, understand this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
You put 50 down, you might need to put another 30 in it.
I'll leave you with this. my saying is, if it has lipstick, check the dipstick, because that's what we've seen. If they look pretty, then we got to start going underneath and looking under the skirt.
It makes sense. And I mean, I've been here 2 weeks. I've seen it myself.
Yeah.
And I've seen the time and attention you guys have put in it. So
yeah,
it's good stuff. All right, brother.
All right.
I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Okay, before we wrap this video up, here's the rules if you want to enter the giveaway. Simply like, share, and comment on this video, the video before it, and the video before that. That's 3 videos in total. These prizes come out to almost $1,500. I will draw these live using random.org. Whoever's name I call first gets to the pick of the litter. Whoever I call second gets to pick the remainder, third and fourth respectively. You have to be 18 years or older to win the knives. Not my rules, is what it is. Pretty easy, Japanesey. And speaking of Japanesey, we've already heard from all the technicians. Again, Redline Land Cruisers is looking for one more technician that will fit into the shop nicely. You've got to be passionate about Toyotas, and you have to have attention to detail. At any rate, I sat down with Justin and we went on for about an hour and 48 minutes. Sadly, this video is already at like 35 minutes and I can't make it that long, but here's a few words from him. These guys don't mess around. I thought they were blowing smoke when I first walked in the shop, but the more I looked at these trucks underneath everywhere else, Bondo on the frame, refrigerant lines for brake lines. It's not every truck you import, but it is the norm. So understand, long story longer, before you go to buy a trailer or before you import a truck that you spend $100,000 on, you wait 9 months for it to show up, do not be surprised if tomfoolery is afoot. It happens a lot. So when I walked into the shop the other day, when I walked into the shop last week, I've met Georgie before, but I mean, we didn't know each other for 2 weeks or so. Once you're working in the shop, you really get to know people, you know what I mean? Under duress, heat, etc.
Right.
I was thinking, this guy's he's an asshole, he's a hater, because I'm looking at the 2 trucks that just came over that you guys, still had to do another 30 grand worth of work to make them legit. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand. These 2 beautiful, shiny FJ40s, the guys just bought them, they import them, they go through that entire rigmarole, and when the trucks come over here, they're still not right.
No, so the premise of what you saw, like George's reaction to when you asked him, oh, these are beautiful trucks, and he said, oh, no, they're not. They are beautiful trucks. What you get is a guy that's passionate about, let's say, building those from, let's say, scratch. And unfortunately, we don't get. There's kind of a thing when you have when you have pride, you want to be able to build that truck for that customer. Like, why didn't you come to us first, kind of thing. So when you import them, they're already pretty, but we know that they need basically all the mechanicals. Everything from the front end to the rear end, the motor, the tranny, the fuel system, the cooling system, they're all subpar. And when we go through, we fix it all up to our standards, we're happy. What happens is you'll see a guy like, oh no, you know, he's remembering when it first came in, what we had to do to it, which is what we love, but the opportunity of not being able to do that for the guy, you know, the painting process, the strip down process, the start from scratch process, which you import a truck that's, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, $50,000, right? Then you put the same amount into the mechanicals, you've got $100,000 to $120,000, you know, resto mod. And we can't call it a full restoration because it's not a full restoration.
Right.
It's not 100% perfect. And it's just, it can't be. Right? You've got a South American truck that's got, well, let's say it's got vintage AC in it or whatever. And for those clients, we're not putting the exact hardware that truck should have come with, let's say for, you know, bolting on the radiator or maybe some of the suspension components or nit-nat.
Or the steering stuff.
It's not CAD plated, it's aftermarket hardware, you know, but we know it's not a restoration. So the term restoration is used really loosely. That's why I like to use Resto Mod, because as soon as you do something that is not 100% OEM from factory, it has been modified. So
right,
you know, it works both ways. I can see those guys that go on test drives, and it's like you take something that was so bad and needed so much work, so much, and you go drive it and it smiles per mile. You know,
Right.
It's for me, it's a sense of pride. For them, it's a sense of pride, and there's frustration in the middle, right? Because you open a can of worms, and any truck that is not brand new off the shelf is going to have a can, multiple cans, cases of cans. And those trucks the worms are big. You know, you get into the stuff and you go, really?
I'm hearing from your techs out there that they're finding Bondo on the frames.
Yeah,
They're finding bolts ground over to look like rivets.
They pretty them up, yeah.
They look at first glance. The trucks you walk in, it's like
they're nice.
It looks
now.
brand new, and then when you really start looking, you see that
There's
there's
a lot
rust
of
bleeding through the
imperfections, yeah.
paint,
Yeah,
things
but
like that.
Because those things are painted in an environment that have, you know, it's 100% humidity.
Absolutely.
Right, so they're not using $1,500, you know, for a pint rust inhibitor protection, blah, blah,
Right,
blah. They're
right.
not doing that. These guys are making 50 cents an hour or whatever.
Or whatever.
And they're pumping them out. And they're making them as flashy and nice looking as they can, so when they hit the block at Meekum or whatever auction house it is, you know, guys are like, ooh, that looks good. And for me, we have trained eyeballs.
Yes.
So we go, all right, we're going to have to go into this area, that area. Basically, everything under the sun or under the chassis has to get done. And what's surprising for me is many of them, as we've probably done, I don't know, 10 maybe, something like that, 10 or more, is they all run well. And they all have good oil pressure. And for me, being as anal as I am on the 2F rebuilds that we do, I go, how is this possible? These guys are rebuilding these motors in a dirty environment.
Right.
You know, and they run good. And I have not had to put a motor in one yet.
Have you dissected one to figure out how they're doing this, or is it just
No.
Toyota?
It's partial to Toyota. You know, those motors were designed to take an absolute beating,
Yeah.
right, and keep running. But these things run good, and I'm very surprised. But everything around the engine needs help. I mean, you name it, it needs it.
The longer I've been here, the more I've seen
Yeah.
it on my own,
Mm-hmm.
which is a trick. Because like I would. How do you deal with somebody who rolls a truck in that they just waited 9 months to make its way across the ocean? They probably paid 50 to 60 grand for this thing. You start doing your check around, and you're looking at around 30,000.
I just tell them straight up.
And then you show it
That's
to
it.
them, and they get it.
Yeah.
Like they understand that. Like, oh, I didn't realize.
Some guys aren't
this.
tech savvy. Like some customers don't understand tech, and I get it. You know, when you go to the hospital and you go, I don't even know what you just said.
Right.
Just now. What are those
Right.
words?
Right. I say it to you all the time. Actually.
Right. It's the same thing. We want to guide each client, whether they got a you know, restoration, resto mod, import truck, something that's coming for a service, you know, Tacoma, an 80 series, whatever we're doing, we want to guide them in a way to where they understand what they have. And we want to be like the doctor. We want to know what we're working with. So the inspection process starts, that's number one, is the inspection process. And we give them all the bads. I don't care about anything good. The bad list. That's what we have to nail down and organize in a manner to where it's an efficient way of repairing the truck correctly,
Right.
so the guy can enjoy it.
Right.
Because he already spent X amount of dollars on it, and he wants to be proud of it, and I want to be proud of it as well. My name's on that truck for the rest of its days, whether it's got 5 owners or 10 from here on out. So we're real anal. I mean, really.
Well,
and
yeah.
you just got to tell them how it is, and then explain and give them options to where they can understand, like, okay, we do have to do this. There's no shortcuts, and I won't shortcut.
No, I know that.
It's
I know
like
that.
one thing after another, and these trucks, so every time we run into, you know, another can of worms, we contact the customer and say, here's what we run into, here's our options, it was unseen, part of the game, and this is what we got to do. What do you want to do?
So there you have it. From the experts. I spent 2 weeks in the shop, and I watched these guys build a 40 series from the ground up. And I also saw several South American vehicles that at first glance looked showroom new. But once you really started looking at them, you realize that these things have been worked over for resale value only. So before you import a truck, understand that many times you're going to spend half or 100% of the actual sale value getting this thing road ready. And that's what this entire video was about. I know a lot of people aren't going to watch it because it's very specific, but I still took the time to make it because I think it's an important topic. At any rate, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below, and I'll try to return the favor. I am out.